Today's guest is Frank Vuono, a man of many talents. Frank and I have known each other 30 plus years. I shouldn't even say that probably, all the way back in his NFL properties days. But Frank is a super interesting guy. We'll welcome to the show in just a second. But he was a Princeton quarterback, Ivy League school, and took that effort and what he learned in quarterbacking at Princeton. Went to Young and Rubicam, a super famous advertising agency. Many of you have heard of Y&R. And then went to the NFL Properties Group. He ran licensing, merchandising, and that's where Frank and I met, and we're going to get to that story in a second. And then 2 or 3 different times started his own shop, left NFL Properties, did a number of interesting things from Integrated Sports International or International Sports Integration. He'll clarify that. 16W Marketing, and most recently, he is the founding partner of Fourth Quarter Marketing. All of these efforts, agency relationships, were built around sport, and we're going to hear a lot more. Frank, can't thank you enough for being a guest on The Best Boss Ever today.
My pleasure. It's great to reunite after all these years, and I'm glad we've kept in touch, and this is fun.
Well, it is fun, and what I didn't mention, and I want you to elaborate a little bit on this, Sports Business Journal, which everybody knows as sort of the Wall Street Journal of the business of sport in our country, has bestowed on you an amazing honor. It's a group, and I'll call them Hall of Famers. They have a name for that group, and they induct 3, 4, 5 executives every single year, and you are in the most recent class. So congrats on that one.
Yeah, thank you. That was a real honor, a surprise actually, but for me it's very satisfying in a lot of ways. One, the class of champions this year had some close friends of mine in it: Carmen Policy, Ross Greenberg, Dave Checketts. So it was a group that I've always had respect for, and we've done a lot of business together over the years. So that was really pleasant. And Sports Business Journal did a great job with it. They hosted a reception for us and a panel down in Nashville, and that was terrific at their Worldwide World of Congress of Sports. I'm sorry, World Congress of Sports. And since then, I've reunited and gotten in touch with folks like you. It kind of brought a lot of people out from the postings and so on, and I still, to this day, and that happened months ago, I'm still receiving notes and people get in contact with me. So it's been very satisfying, really satisfying.
Well, not surprised to hear any of that. And you and I both come from a similar cut of cloth. It's a people business. It doesn't matter who you represent, what brand you represent, what rights holder you represent. None of that matters. It's a people business, and those relationships are hugely valuable. And the way one manages those relationships over the course of one's career is a testament to, an award like becoming one of the sports business champions. I mean, congrats again on that.
Right.
So listen, let's. We're not going to do a resume crawl here, but you come out of college, you start at Y&R, hugely successful ad agency. I'm going to guess you learned your marketing chops there. Why don't you start there? But what I really want to hear is, as you progress through your career, who, or maybe more than one who, was the best boss, leader, influencer, coach, your call, you ever had, what you learned from that individual, and those learnings that stayed with you that were hallmarks of your success?
Yeah, starting at Y&R, I had some great bosses, but the first person I had interviewed with there was a fellow by the name of Matt Chrissy, who's one of my best friends to this day. So we go back, what is it? I don't know, 48 years, whatever it is. And I had my wedding at his house,
Wow.
and he's been a mentor and just a close friend ever since. And he took a shot with me because back in those days, I didn't get a master's degree. And when you started out in account management in the advertising business in those days, it was almost mandatory that you had to have a master's degree or an MBA. And they took a shot with me. I told them I would start shining shoes, and in 2 years, if I didn't work my way up and was past where I would have been if I went and got my MBA, I said then I'll go back and get my MBA. But if you start me now and you give me a shot, I'm sure I'll prove my mettle to you, my worth, and they did, and had a great run. Matt was a lot like me, street guy, Italian guy. We were kind of the exception rather than the rule there, so we learned how to push the envelope and almost break some rules, and then kind of then repent after we got caught. But we did a lot of crazy stuff. We worked together on the General Foods account, rather, Jello account, and we worked with Bill Cosby back then, in the height of his popularity, and he taught me a lot. Taught me I had a temper. He taught me how to, keep that under wraps and to be careful with that. Taught me how to respect the client, even if I didn't think much of them or I thought they were bullshit artists or whatever. He helped me a lot. He taught me preparation is king. Never go into a meeting without being prepared. And I did that. And I worked my tail off. It was almost comical because some people started saying, if you don't come in Saturday, don't bother coming in Monday. And, for our group, it was like, if you don't come in Saturday and Sunday, don't bother coming in Monday. So I didn't take a day off for, I don't know, the first 6 months in the business, I didn't take a single day off. And I loved it and dove into it. I learned a lot about strategy, about positioning a brand, and that carried with me for the rest of my career. And then there was Ed Ney, who was the chairman of Young and Rubicam. He just said, I certainly was way down the totem pole in terms of, the chairman of Young and Rubicam worldwide. But funny story, the very first day I was there, a client took me out, got me drunk, took me to the Palm, and I had a bunch of martinis and everything else, went back to my desk, fell asleep. And I didn't know it was tradition that the chairman of Young and Rubicam comes around and welcomes you on your first day. So here's this guy with the bow tie. He had the Godfather voice. Somebody wakes me up and says, Frank, how are you? This is Ed Ney. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm drooling on my desk, And he goes, you look tired. I go, client took me out. He goes, he knew who it was, and so on and so forth. And he kind of patted me on the shoulder. He goes, I think I'll get you a ride home. So, he got me a car back to Jersey. But forever, I had a bunch of other stories about him. I won't belabor that, but he was just a class act. He actually bought me shoes. He bought me a suit because I was wearing gray patent leather shoes. I was a work in progress, but he saw something in me and paid attention and helped me out a lot. So I had good leadership there as well. I had a bunch of other bosses who were really good. I also had some bad bosses, which teaches you a lot. Right?
It does.
A couple of bosses. I was moving up really quickly, and I thought everything was great. And all of a sudden, a guy that was 2 levels up from me, a guy named Fernand Montero, I'll never forget, called me in his office and says, Frank, he goes, I heard great things about you. I heard you were a real superstar. But I got to tell you, I just don't see it. I haven't seen your work. I haven't seen you contributing. And I'm scratching my head. I'm going, what? Turned out the guy that was my boss right above me was handing in all my work and taking all the credit. And so I had to go back and get all my paperwork and everything else and show him and say, this is all my work. These are all my ideas. So I learned about being a bad boss. The guy that was my boss was a bad boss. So you learn those things along the way. You say, I'll never let that happen. If somebody comes up with ideas, I'm going to make sure that I tell everybody else about it. And make sure, people get their proper credit. And I think that's a good part about being a boss. And I think you got to be you start learning really on. When I started learning really on, and I could apply that to my subsequent jobs and careers, you learn there's great bosses who are secure and who are confident. and then there are bosses who are insecure. And the insecure ones are the bad bosses
That's right.
because they're never going to try to empower you. They're always going to be worried about who their successor is, and they always want the credit. And a really good boss, you don't need the credit because you're confident in what you do, and you know what you're going to achieve, and you try to lift the people that work with you, and you try to make them great. I had a really great boss in Y&R as well, a guy by the name of Hayes Roth, who later on became, a real, um, the CEO of a top branding agency in the business. Slips my mind the name. I'll remember it eventually. But I'm sitting on a plane with him, traveling to see a client, and he says, Frank, he goes, you're just terrific. You're just going to be a star. So, like when you get up and you're really successful, I just want you to remember me and and think about me. So somebody says that to you, go, holy shit, this and he was, he was a hitter in the industry,
Right.
over the years. But we've always kept in touch. But he just, for somebody to say something to you, that just makes you work harder, makes you, you want to run through a wall for somebody like that, right?
That's right.
He's not begrudging you your success. He's encouraging you. He's rooting for your success. So I think you bring that all in, you internalize all that, and you take those lessons forward, and you try to develop the people that work with you, and reward your team, and give people the freedom to fail, reward them for their successes, and pump them up, and kick them in the ass when you have to, and teach them all the good things. So those are all great things from the Y&R days. And then at NFL, I had a mixed bag, but ultimately the guy that was my mentor and is my friend to this day, Paul Tagliabue, just one of the greatest, one of the smartest men I ever met. And we didn't report to the commissioner's office back then. I worked for what was called NFL Properties, as you
Right.
know, and we reported to a group of owners on a quarterly basis or whatever. But when Paul came in, it was towards the latter part of my stay at the NFL. We just hit it off, and I would get these small printed notes from Joe Brown, who was his right-hand man, his communication guy, and it would say, Paul would like to have lunch with you today. And I knew that meant we were going to the Four Seasons Grill, which was his favorite place. And we'd come over, and he'd just vent, and unlike the public image, he was incredibly funny and incredibly smart. But he would ask me just about the feedback. He wanted something real. He wanted somebody that watched the sport religiously, that could give him, that wasn't a yes man. He didn't want
Right.
to hear. He didn't want to hear anybody blowing smoke. So we had a great relationship, and that carried through my entire career to this day. When I left the NFL, he brought me back and hired me to keep the Saints in New Orleans and work on behalf of the league to do the revenue generation after Katrina.
Right.
And he sat me down when I first left, did kind of an exit interview, asked me why I was leaving, and then he said, listen, we're going to really need your help. I'm going to change the dynamic of revenue sharing in the league. We need to build stadiums because we're playing in old rented baseball stadiums. People today take it for granted. You're going to a football stadium, and God, they get 20 years old and they replace them.
Right.
Back then the teams were playing in falling down stadiums. They were simply just, a tenant in a building that had terrible views and terrible facilities and, old baseball stadiums. And he said, we got to change the fan experience because otherwise people just watch on TV. Nobody will go to the games. So he said, I'm going to change the revenue sharing. I'm going to need you to help the owners generate revenue because they don't know what they're doing from a marketing standpoint. So, we're going to need money. They're going to need money to go to the banks to get the money for the loans to build stadiums, and they're going to need a revenue stream. So he helped me out and introduced me, to all the owners. And I worked for the Cowboys and the 49ers and the Browns and the Carolina Panthers and so on and so forth. He helped me out a lot with that. So that's just another great example. But
Was that in your agency? So when you left, you started your agency, and it was via the agency that Paul introduced you around?
yes. Yeah.
Got it.
Well, I also was partners with, as you know, with Lee Steinberg and Jeff Morad, who were investors in my company, and they had all the quarterbacks in the league. That was the other part of, my forming my own agency, was representing the top quarterbacks in the league and a lot of the talent. Because that was after we formed the quarterback club, which you said we'll talk about
Right.
eventually, which really began with the quarterback challenge. So that, and then there were other people, frankly, that since I formed my own agency in '93, I didn't have that many bosses in my life, but
Yeah.
I had a lot of mentors and I had a lot of influences, and there were guys like Bill DeVries was the head of all of Foot Locker and Lady Foot Locker and Champs, and the biggest retailer of NFL products out there. He was a real mentor of mine. He took me under his wing. He helped me learn to play golf. The funny thing, I had my kids, and I was on the phone with them, and he says, "How's your golf game?" And I said, I'm going to give it up. I just don't have the time. He goes, "Give it up." And I go, "Yeah, my kids are busy on the weekends. I got sports. I got 3 little daughters, blah, 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 blah." He goes, "Well, don't play on the weekends. Play during the week." I go, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "How hard is it to get in touch with me?" I go, "You're like the President of the United States." And he says, "Yeah, well, but when I call you, say, let's play golf, you spend 5, 6 hours with me, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well," he goes, "use golf for business." That begot a whole lot of things. I signed Payne Stewart to play the PGA Tour, and Payne helped me learn how to play golf, and I dove into the whole golf business, and that was that. And so I learned a lot from Bill, and I picked up a lot of things along the way from mentors like him and some others along the way that were not necessarily my bosses, but I watched. I took it all in and absorbed all the great things that they did.
That's something that I think, well, I'll just call it discernment, right? You're in the workplace. We talked earlier on about relationships and the value of relationships because it's a people business. And even though you might not go play golf with X, Y, or Z leader, your observation, you watch what they do, you watch what they don't do, you watch what they say, you watch how they comport themselves in a, large environment with lots of people, or even in a much smaller, more intimate environment, 2 or 4 folks going out to dinner, right?
Yeah,
The,
today I serve on like 7 boards of the largest health organization, health network in New Jersey, Hackensack Meridian Health. And it's another just example. The CEO, who I've been friendly with since I got on the board in 1999 of Hackensack University Medical Center, which was not Hackensack University Medical Center at the time. It was just a regional hospital, Hackensack Hospital. And this thing has grown over the years to be the biggest network, 20 hospitals, 200 doors, 37,000 employees, all of that. So I've been on the board for 26 years. And there was this guy who I got to know who was a senior executive at Hackensack Hospital, who ultimately became the CEO of the network, and that's Bob Garrett. And you talk about leadership, you talk about, now he's not my boss, like I'm really his boss. I'm the vice chairman of it,
right.
but he's the boss, right? And so I'm just observing him, and he's a visionary. He's a tireless worker. He's a caring SOB. I mean, this guy just visits with everybody, never misses something to reward the workers, and he's out there with the patients. He travels all over the world now because of the position that he has. We were just honored as one of the top 20 hospital networks in the country.
Wow.
And the U.S. News and World Report. Wherever there's head honchos talking about stuff that's going to change the world, he's there, and he's a great example to me. We've been friendly for a long time, but I have nothing but the utmost respect for him and his leadership abilities. And you talk about relationships and bonding with people and so on. This guy's just got incredible respect around the entire organization, and I don't know how he does it. He doesn't have a spare minute on his calendar, but he's managed his family. That's another thing. When you talk about great leaders and people that you look up to, and mentors and coaches and great bosses, you look at their family life, right? Can they balance the work-life environment? Are they cheaters? Are they Are they screwing around? Are they doing stupid stuff? Or are they just great family guys, right? And for me, I'm gravitating to the great family guys. And I can point to so many people who have been so successful over the years who, have just been married their entire life. And listen, divorce is 50%, right? In marriages or whatever. I'm not criticizing that it happens, but you'll see the guys that I'm talking about who just value family and put family first and really juggle that work-life experience, work-home experience. And, it's something I'm really proud of. And I've learned that from the people that I look up to and who have been my mentors as well. So,
that's huge. I've had more than our share of really successful and becoming more successful women on the program. More often than not, they're moms. And the balance between a working mom and her family compared to a working dad and his family, those are really, two different lenses of exactly the same requirement. And I think you're 100% right, Frank. The family values first end up showing forth in the business life, as opposed to the other way around, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the other great things about the advertising business. Was that was ahead of its time. The diversity in the hiring and the women that had risen to. I had a lot of women bosses in the advertising business in the time I was there, and they were great. And I had an ultimate respect, and still do to this day. I got a wife and 3 daughters. Working daughters and everything else, and so I have tremendous respect for that. But that's certainly more difficult when you're the mom, and I but still I think that when I think of those, when you said that, I was thinking of women who were bosses in my life, and I was thinking, they're all very successful at juggling motherhood and being home and having a family, and that's really hard. Right.
That's right. So you take 3 separate times you've started agencies. It seems like the first couple, you actually did have employees, you grew agencies, you managed a team, right? You had a lot of clients, not surprisingly. More recently, you tell me, it feels like you might be more frank. And Frank's getting tapped to do certain things because of your experience, whether it's, being invited to sit on a board, I want to unpack that a little bit, or whether it's a historical relationship or a valued relationship you have and somebody picks the phone up and says, hey, Frank, I have this challenge, or we have this challenge, and we want to know if you're willing to help.
Yeah, that happens regularly, but I'm mostly retired now. I will tell you that. I got out of 16W with my partner of 30 years, Steve Rosner, just so I can kick back a little. I just felt it was time. But yeah, I'm doing exactly what you say, but I do it now with phone calls and and I said to somebody the other day, my Rolodex, and they kind of looked at me like, what the hell are you talking about, right?
Well, or what's a Rolodex?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Your Rolodex. But yeah, so, but in the interim, we had a lot of employees, and those are the things I'm most proud of, the success of those employees and how far they've gone and so on. I mean, just through the years, there's just an all-star team out there, and when I was interviewed for the Sports Business Journal Champions article, I talked about that, and they asked me what my legacy was, and I said the legacy is all the people that have gone on to be so successful in the business and rise to great things. I mean, we had just an incredible team at the NFL properties, and we had 2 commissioners, one in NASCAR and one in Major League Soccer now, who were there during my time. And actually, there were 3. The guy who left, whose position I took, was the guy who founded the Arena Football League, a guy by the name of Jim Foster. And so, but they're Arlen Cantarian and Rick Dudley and Jim Schwabel and Jim Connolly and all these guys went on to be heads of big agencies and everything else. And it was. I've been real blessed. I've been part of some great things. And then ISI, with my partners, Steve Rosner and Fred Freed. We had, at one point in time, we had over 70 employees, and that was before we were bought by SFX. And then of course, once we were bought by SFX, we had hundreds.
Right.
But making that payroll every 2 weeks was a real challenge.
Yeah, you don't know what keeps you up at night till you got to make a payroll.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and then there are times when you're not taking your own draw, right?
That's right.
You got to make payroll. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
guys, we're gonna have to eat it. This
Right. Right.
paycheck, and your partners look at you like, well, let's not.
Yeah.
do
Well.
that much.
Yeah. No, that's a really good segue because it's story time. And I'm going to go back and we're going to talk about when and how and why you and I first met. So at this time, late 80s, I have my own agency. And I know what waking up in the middle of the night, how the hell am I going to make payroll on Friday, feels like. So we have this concept, idea. It's pretty well fleshed out, not 100%. It's called Quarterback Challenge. And the idea is to take NFL quarterbacks, and that was thing one. Thing two, actually, almost as successful was the retired quarterbacks, which we called the golden quarterbacks, right? So we had this concept, and I took it to NBC Sports, and the guys I pitched are still there. John Miller's still there. Gary Zinkel is still there. And they listened, and you could see the wheels turning. And at the time, NBC was the broadcaster for the old American Football Conference, the AFC. And so Miller looks right at me and he says, "I love this idea, but we are the AFC broadcaster. And if you're going to have 10 quarterbacks on the field, 7 of those 10 have to be AFC quarterbacks." And so I'm thinking to myself, all right, I get this. So where do I go to get a relationship with AFC quarterbacks? You know where I had to go? Marvin Demoff. Exactly. Marv's got Elway, he's got Marino, he's got Jim Everett. So you don't get Marvin's guys, you don't have a show. So I sit down with Marvin, and in fact, I got to Marvin via now deceased Barry Axelrod. Barry and I went to UCLA together. He was my personal attorney, and he worked for Marvin for a number of years, and then he migrated to baseball, and arguably was one of the best agents in baseball ever. Scott Boras might take issue with that, but Barry was, Rick Sutcliffe, Wally Joyner, the killer bees in Houston. I mean, Barry was legit. And he'd worked for Marvin, and he said, and I'll never forget this. He said, "Oh, yeah, it's easy for me to introduce you to Marvin. Just be careful." Okay. So Marvin takes the call. I go up there. I pitch him. Long story short, we get everything pulled together. NBC comes on via Marvin. I want to say, Frank, that might have been the connection with you, because as we're fleshing out what became the NFL Quarterback Challenge, you simultaneously created the NFL Quarterback Club. So I'm going to stop there and let you kind of riff on that, because there's a whole lot of stories around the first 3 years of that event.
Wow, yeah. It probably was simultaneous because, the Quarterback Club was revolutionary, really, because I was at NFL Properties working for the owners, and here were these real prominent players who were the stars of the game. But I was always a player guy. I played myself, and not pro, but college, and I would go to these conferences and see that the only thing that the NFL wasn't most popular or best at was the players, because the players played in the helmet. They didn't get a lot of exposure, and frankly, the owners at the time kind of wanted to keep the players in line, so to speak. And then, they figured the bigger the star they were, the more they'd have to pay them, and they didn't like that. But so through a series of events, sponsoring Payne Stewart on the PGA Tour, I wound up sending golf clothes to the quarterbacks who were having charity golf outings. They invited me to their outings. I got to know them. They got to trust me. And one thing begot another. And there were, great ideas have a lot of authors, right? But there were a bunch of people who had this notion to put the quarterbacks together in a group. And I came up with the notion to have them form their own company and have NFL properties and me represent them. And that's what we did. And the key players are, of course, if you got Danny Marino, and kind of Troy Aikman was doing a broadcast one night, and they were doing a Dolphins game, and Danny was in a suite, and he said, I was a member of the quarterback club, and Danny was like Sinatra, right? He was the chairman of the board, right? So Danny was real influential. Joe Montana didn't want to come on, didn't want favored nations, thought he was a bigger star than all the other guys. So Danny was really the key. And Marvin represented Danny, and Marvin helped me put it together with his right-hand man, Jeff Dankworth, and
Yep.
They kind of made introductions. And at the same time, Don Garber was really involved, because Don and I were commuting into the city together. We worked in NFL properties together, and Don was made head of new business, kind of like I was.
Right.
And so somehow or another, Don got to know you guys too, and Don had attended the event before it was an NFL event. So Don invited me, and Marvin invited me, and they said, you ought to see this. These guys are going to be competing in this quarterback challenge. And I'm like, well, how can we have a quarterback challenge with NFL players and not be the NFL quarterback challenge, right?
Well, that's right, and I mean that's a super interesting, what I will call, anomaly here, because when we first pitched it, it was quarterback challenge, not NFL quarterback challenge. And you are correct. In the first year, the NFL didn't have the shield on it.
Right.
We did have a sponsor, and NBC broadcast it. And what came out of that, Frank, was, you, Don Garber, now Commissioner Garber, 25 years at Major League Soccer, arguably one of the, I don't know, the superlative word escapes me at the moment, but clearly to take the league from virtually inception. I mean, he came on 2 or 3 years after the league started to where it is today, where a new franchise goes for $500 million. That's not nothing. That's a very seriously good job done. But Don and I met, and he was kind of on the event side. And, we were, I guess, to use a cooking analogy, we had all the right ingredients, but we didn't have it in the right proportion, right? It wasn't fully baked. But when you and the quarterback club came in with Marvin's help and leadership, we got, the whole league on the property side fully behind the event. And then the mini spinoff there, the Golden Quarterback Challenge, where we brought in recently retired quarterbacks, and in the case of Sonny Jurgensen, a quarterback that had been out of the league for 15 years or whatever. I mean, that was priceless. And I can remember to this day Archie and Olivia Manning showing up with all 3 of their kids, Cooper, Peyton, and Eli. And those guys were just munchkins, right? They just were bumping into each other, raising hell, going all over the place. Obviously going to be emerging great athletes, but I'll never forget that. And then I'm going to mention one other story. Marvin also represented Bobby Beathard, and Bobby was a general manager in the league, and one of the elder quarterbacks that showed up was Burt Jones.
Yeah, I know the story.
You know the story, right?
I was going to say it after.
No, you tell the story because it's amazing.
So yeah, Bobby Beathard was the GM and quite successful. And he comes and he watches the event, and Burt Jones is competing in the seniors. And at that time, the 2 top guys from the retired players event would play in the regular quarterback challenge, which was a great idea.
Right.
And so Burt Jones is out there, and Burt was a laid-back guy, and he had retired because he had something with his neck. But he actually competed in his bare feet. and he won the senior event, the retired players event, and then he really competed, and I don't know if
Competed well. Yeah.
he did very, very well against the young guys. And Bobby Method right there saw him and said, "I want to sign you." He tried to bring him back and
He tried to bring him back.
and tried to sign him. Absolutely. But
Yeah, and Marvin tried hard to get that done. And I guess, and you probably know this story, Frank, the Rams at the time had the rights to Burt Jones, and they just wouldn't let him go.
right, right. I remember that. There's a lot of irony and all that. I've represented Boomer Esiason for years, and he took number 7 because of Burt Jones, and Burt Jones was like his idol growing up, and that was like passing it a baton back then. Boomer was thrilled that he was competing in this event with Burt Jones. It was, like his man, and there were a lot of connections there. And we moved to Kauai. We had a fabulous resort there. I'm still friends with Dickie Chang, who was a concierge there.
He's the mayor that's not the mayor, right?
Yeah. And, we brought it to Kauai, and they welcomed us, and we had that fabulous Marriott resort. It was really, those were glory days. They really were.
Yeah, it was. It was amazing. And you couldn't have scripted it better, and you couldn't have drawn it up better, because literally a golf cart ride away from that resort where we all stayed and they treated us so well. You take the golf cart up across the golf course, and there is the local Lahui High School football stadium and football field, and we conducted everything right there. It was literally a 5-minute golf cart ride.
Right.
And the island was so welcoming, and they couldn't do anything more than they already did, right? They did everything for us.
Right. Yeah, they were very appreciative. We had tremendous attendance, and high school kids went crazy. And it was they gave the kids off for school that day.
That's right.
And it was, again, it was great. And we got great ratings. Just great.
We did.
We
crushed it.
To this day, the owners have gotten so hypersensitive about people getting hurt and doing things, and I'm saying, we didn't really, the quarterbacks didn't do anything but throw a football. I mean,
that's right.
So
right.
Why can't there be a quarterback challenge to this day? I never understood it. We did it for a real long time. It lasted a real long time. We did a video game based on it.
Yep.
We did the quarterback challenge video game with a claim. It was, it went on until basically we had to sell the quarterback club back to the Players Association, and when they went at it on a collective bargaining agreement, and they refused to sign unless we sold them back to quarterback club, and then they just the whole thing instead of using it as an attraction and as a positive marketing effort for their players. They disbanded the whole thing. So.
Right. Well, over the run, I don't know, 5-7 years, something like that, other than maybe Joe Montana, every single top-notch NFL quarterback showed up one year or the other, or in some instances, multiple years in a row.
Oh, yeah.
And what NBC, I think, did a brilliant job of, Frank, was not just showing the competition, because it was fun. It was like a kind of a video game on TV, right? That's exactly what it was. But what they did really well is they got under the covers, if you will, of who these NFL quarterbacks really were. Their families, their personas, their personalities, their humor, their athletic skill, and they told stories that you don't hear today. You just don't hear them on TV. You just don't have the access to those players the way we once did, and I think that's clearly one of the hallmarks. And I dare say, if you picked up the phone and talked to any single one of those quarterbacks that were there at the time, they would tell it. I mean, I talked to Kevin Demoff a couple times a year, and Kevin was, I don't know, 8, something like that. And not now, obviously, president of all of what Kroenke's doing in sports, and a noteworthy, huge star in his own right from a business perspective. But we sort of a year ago at an SBJ event where he and Marvin were on stage together, and Abe Madcore was asking Marvin and Kevin questions. It was so good, and I got to Kevin afterward, and I said, "Do you remember?" I didn't even get the words out of my mouth. He said, "That's one of my best memories of all time, is going to the NFL Quarterback Challenge in Kauai, where what you just described, was on full display. Really good time."
Yeah, just great stuff. And back then, there were no cell phones, no social media and all that. So, the players could enjoy themselves and be themselves without worrying about everything winding up on social media and so on.
No, exactly right. Talk about being off the record. I mean, other than what NBC captured, it was fully off the record. And everybody's hair was let down. The kids had a great time. The wives had a great time. Everybody had a great time. It was super fun.
Yeah, and a lot of it came together because of the quarterback club. They became an owner in the event or whatever.
Right.
And so it just there were a lot of things that just fell into place. So I also was able to talk the league into taking 3 quarterbacks for each team for the AFC and the NFC out the Pro Bowl. And we then scheduled the quarterback challenge right after that. So we had 6 quarterbacks there already.
Yep.
At the Pro Bowl, who were obviously Pro Bowl players, who were top guys, and so they just flew over from, they took their families from
Honolulu to Kauai.
From Oahu to Kauai, and the rest was easy. So
no, that's good stuff. We could go on and on about that, Frank, because there are far many more stories to be told that haven't been told, but we're going to leave that for another time. Listen, we've got a few minutes left, and all of our guests answer the same 3 questions, and they're 3 good ones. So the first one is, what was your favorite mistake? That's where you messed up. You messed up in a pretty big way, but you learned from it, you recovered from it, and you took those learnings forward.
Well, in between my days at Young and Rubicam and at the NFL, most people don't know, I went to, with that fellow I mentioned earlier, my first boss, Matt Chrissy, we did a crazy thing. We took a company public. We formed a company called Integrated Barter International, and we took it out on the penny stock market and raised a lot of millions of dollars. And it was a wild and crazy ride, one of which I would never want to ever do again. If you ever saw some of these movies with the guys in the boiler rooms calling people up, churning money and all that crap.
Glenn Ross.
Just crazy, stupid stuff. It was definitely a mistake, and my hair was falling out, and there was investigations, and the guy who was the chairman was doing stupid trading and so on and so forth that I was totally naive and unaware about. But I learned a lot. I learned about the mistakes you make when you form a company without being properly financed and so on. So when the time came, I left there, we went to the NFL, and thank God. And when the time came for me to leave the NFL and form my own company, my own agency, I took the lessons learned from that and made sure I was properly financed, made sure I didn't overstep, and made sure honesty is the best policy, did everything by the book, crossed my T's and dotted my I's, and I definitely had learned what not to do when you start a business. So
right. Well, that's great advice.
That was my mistake along the way, and I don't talk about that very often. It's not on my
thanks.
Or anything else. So
thank you for sharing, because this audience, those that are entrepreneurial minded, have to keep that exact thing in mind. Because if you don't, you sort of you are the architect of your own demise at the outset. So that's a really good one.
Right.
A second question is the favorite concert show you ever attended where a female artist, singer, songwriter, or a female-led band was the headliner?
The most special one to me, I've seen a lot. I love music, love rock. Probably the most emotional one was my wife's favorite singer during her lifetime was Diana Ross. And when we sold our company, ISI, to SFX in the late 90s, they owned a lot of amphitheaters around the country. So they owned the PNC Arts Center in New Jersey, and I was able to secure front row tickets to Diana Ross and brought my wife, and Diana Ross gave my wife roses and handed
Wow.
them. So that's the one I would say.
That's the one you better say. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one. Words matter. We talked a little bit about it all the way through this show. It's what you say, what you don't say, how you say it. So the question is your favorite word and why?
Words go through my brain really quickly, you know, prepare, respect, but I'd have to say the top one would be honesty. My father used to teach me to never lie.
Right.
And he said, if you tell the truth all the time, you're never going to have to worry about remembering what you said.
Right.
Because it was the truth as you knew it at the time. He said, so just, you get in a tough situation, tell the truth. You have to make hard decisions, be honest. And I think that's the word to live by. You know?
Well, that's a great way to end this, Frank, because you are correct, and the values that you and your family have lived out over the course of time, you know, sort of depicted in your business career and the honors that you've received recently, all good. Can't thank you enough for the time you spent with us today on the Best Boss Ever podcast. Thanks, man.
All right. Great to see you. Keep in touch.
Will do.
All right. Take care.